Technical difficulties, sir.
Representative Darby, we're so glad that you're with us. We know that we realize, those of us who watch politics closely understand that you do a lot of heavy lifting for West Texas down in the legislature, particularly with transportation funding issues. Thank you for being with us. How are you today?
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here. Glad to be here with your listening audience and you.
Well, I saw a great quote from you the other day. I'll just tee it up for you. It was, vouchers are a way for the city folks to get the state to finance their own private schools. I tend to think that that might be one of your legislative priorities this year, is how to address that from coming into West Texas.
Well, you know, as a parent of 5 children, all of my 5 children have been educated through the public schools here in Texas, and I'm a strong supporter of public schools. I think they form the backbone of our state and certainly our region and West Texas in particular. So I want to do everything we can as a state to support our public institutions and the families that those institutions support. And so, you know, any attempt to improve the public education system, I'm going to be supportive of and sensitive to. And so we have these proposals come through the legislative process periodically. I know there were some the last 3 sessions or 4 sessions that I've been here, but I'm sure there'll be another attempt to introduce vouchers, is that term is commonly referred to. They do it under the guise of school choice, and of course we all want each of our children to receive the best education possible, and I'm going to be open to listening how this new round of programs will affect that. But whenever we talk about taking state dollars and moving them to private institutions, the question always has to be followed up with, what are the accountability measures that make sure our state dollars are being used in a non-discriminatory fashion, in an accountability environment where the teachers and the schools are held accountable for performance by the kids, that there are measures that prevent discrimination, selective enrollment of kids in private institutions. So with state dollars, the problem has always been, when you have state dollars, you have strings attached, and should have strings attached. And that's where we always break down, is when we start to say, if you want our state dollars, you have to have our same accountability for the school and for the teachers and for the curriculum and all of that, then the response has typically been, well, no, we don't want that, or we don't want that string, or we don't want to perform at the same level as our public schools. So I think we need to be ever vigilant. We need to be open to considering what are ways that we can help our public schools and each child in Texas receives a good quality education. But yet recognize that with state dollars bring state responsibilities, and as long as those state responsibilities meet the same curriculum and requirements and as our public schools, then that'll be part of the discussion. But nobody's ever demonstrated to me that a voucher program will be good for my public schools, and which form the lifeblood of our West Texas way of life, and something that we hold very near and dear to our hearts.
Yeah, my problem, Representative Drew Darby, is that here in rural Texas, you start throwing out vouchers and going into to private institutions. I mean, where are those rural kids going to go? They're out in the middle of the country and probably not close to a school where they would be able to even do that. So you
may, and being from Lubbock, and I would say most of the reach of this station would be in the Lubbock region. You'd have surrounding communities that may or may not have their kids in Friendship or Wolford or Levelland or Littlefield or Brownfield or wherever drive to a private institution in Lubbock. And so the challenge is options. Now, maybe there are options in a large urban setting, but there are not that many options available to our West Texas communities and to the schools that serve them. And so I just want to make sure we give the resources to our public schools that they deserve, and that they receive the best possible education at our public schools.
Well, and I think as a member of this West Texas delegation, whenever I begin to listen to you talk, Representative Darby, what I begin to consider is that our rural towns really are situated on these independent school districts. It's a primary, in lots of places, and I would say a majority of places, it's a primary employer. The culture of the town as well as the society of the town is based around that school. And I think there's a lot of credence whenever I hear people say, another word for vouchers is consolidations. And whenever you begin to consolidate, and West Texas schools have a lot of overhead that they have to cover, whenever you begin to consolidate schools, you begin to consolidate towns.
Yes, and you know, I tell people, and you know, you talk about consolidated schools. I said, you just need to go to Winters and Ballinger, and if you get out of there alive, go over to Broughton, Robert Lee, and I'm sure Littlefield and Brownfield and Levelland up there and Friendship and some of the other schools. It's just not an idea that's popular or I think workable in West Texas. Should we always look at ways to bring efficiencies in purchasing and transportation, that sort of thing? Yes, I think those are opportunities, but I'm not in support of consolidation of school districts because that is the very real identity of our small cities and the communities that they serve. And after having made that statement, I had some detractors say, "Well, all I'm interested in is West Texas football," and that's I am interested in West Texas football.
Who's not?
In sports, certainly that is a priority with me. But that doesn't identify. That's not what our public schools are all about. It's about serving the needs of our local community, and those school districts reflect the needs of our local community. And you're exactly right. The teachers that work at that school and the coaches that coach there and the instructors and the bus drivers and the superintendents and the assistant clerks, they all live and work around that community, and they serve the needs of that community, and they reflect the values of that community, and they're typically the largest employer, but they're also reflective of the communities in which they're located. And so we just need to make sure they have the resources that it takes to educate these kids properly, and those kids have the opportunities that kids throughout the state of Texas have. And so that's my role in the legislature, is to make sure we protect our rural way of life, that we do so with prudence and fiscal responsibility, but also with an eye to make sure they have the opportunities that folks in cities have, and so whether it be the arts or music or any other role of education, that our kids have that same access. And so that's really what I think our West Texas community is good at, is the representation. And West Texas have always stood up to those values and have protected one another and protected the citizens that we represent.
You're listening to House Representative Drew Darby, a Republican out of San Angelo on the West Texas Drive. We're so pleased to have him with us. Representative, I want to follow up on one statement that you made about options. And this will be the last point in the voucher conversation before we move over into the speaker's race. But you say options. We often hear this voucher idea, which is veiled as a tax credit idea, as a tax credit concept, I should say. We often hear it characterized as competition, as almost in market economy language. You say options, and I don't mean to mischaracterize what you said, but what we hear pretty consistently up this way is that schools need competition. Public schools need a competition. It'll breed better education. Do you agree with that statement? And how would you, how do you process that statement whenever you hear me say what we often hear?
You know, of course, I'm a businessman, and I understand what competition does for business. It makes you respectful of the consumer and trying to be responsive to the consumer needs. But you know, we just can't put our public schools in entirely within a business model, and that's what I see a lot of folks saying when they say bring competition. I think competition is derived through our teachers and administrative personnel being responsive to the parents and saying, this is what we want for our children, and then if there's a need in that school, then that school addresses that need. And we have resources through our regional service centers, for example, in rural Texas, where you, for example, if they don't have enough resources for an art teacher, then through the regional service centers, we're able to provide that access to teaching art in communities that don't have a lot of students that want that particular curriculum. But competition, the business model for schools doesn't always work. Our schools must be accountable not only to the state and to standards established by the state, but they've got to be accountable to the parents and to the business community where these schools are located, that they're turning out kiddos that are capable of one, either going to college if that's what they want to do, or two, going into a trade school if that's what they want to do, or being an educated graduates capable of entering the workforce here in Texas. So I think that's the competition, is that we have all of these various stakeholders in the education process that have a stake in the outcome. And because they have a stake in the outcome, they will hold each individual school responsible for the product that they turn out. And you just can't equate a business model that directly with our schools, and that's the mistake that I see sometimes. People say, well, this ought to be about the cheapest service provided by two competing interests, and you just can't do that in our small rural communities.
And I'm sure, I'm sorry to cut you off, go ahead.
No, we don't have the workforce. Teachers are teachers, and they must be certified and meet a certain education and qualification criteria, and those are hard to get to in rural Texas. But I don't want to take our state dollars and redirect them to private pockets simply in the interest of pursuing some business model that doesn't work in rural Texas.
Sure. No business, whether or not, I come from business too, but you don't provide the factory in which the widgets will be produced for your competition. I want to move over to the speaker's race. We just had Ross Ramsey on, and Ross alluded to Tim Dunn, who runs Empower Texans, and I want to ask you specifically about some material that we see that's been produced and distributed by that organization and into media outlets, a couple in particular up here that have been providing this information. The Empower Texans Foundation. The title of it is the Joe Straus Record. There are lots of claims within there, and I'm sure that you could point out a couple and talk about the veracity of them, but with me giving that preface, why given these claims, are you supporting Joe Straus?
Well, first of all, and I don't know exactly what those claims you're referring to, but I will say that I have read some of the material that is being published either in print or online through social media, et cetera, and it's just a lot of it is intentionally distorted. A lot of it is they're taking threads from non-reliable sources and simply building on that storyline in order to achieve a specific purpose. There's just no question in my mind that Joe Straus, and through his role as Speaker of the House, has been a very, very conservative Speaker of our Texas House of Representatives. We have, I don't care if it's fiscal policy, education, border security, Second Amendment, pro-life, budget transparency, all of these issues, there's no question that the Texas House of Representatives have led on strong conservative issues, and Joe Straus, in that leadership, allows representatives such as myself and other West Texas representatives to bring to the House floor and to pass off the House floor issues that are important to us. It is a member-driven process, and the membership determines the agenda of the Texas House. Whether it be water or transportation or public education or higher education. Obviously, I'm a huge supporter of higher education, Texas Tech University, Angelo State University, which is a proud member of the Texas Tech University system. All of that is made possible by a member-driven process that allowed us to move these issues forward. And Joe Straus has not stood in the way of any of that. He has enabled the members to facilitate that. If legislation has failed, it's not because of Joe Straus. It's because it didn't have the support of the membership. And so I am exceedingly confident that we have done great things to make Texas the number one destination in the Union, the number one economy in the United States, and has created a fiscal policy that allows us to continue that. So Joe Straus is being victimized, in my opinion, by false and malicious record that distorts his true gains and distorts the process. And the Texas House Speaker is elected by 150 members of the Texas House. We're the ones that decide who represents us during the next legislative cycle, which is 2 years. We're the ones that decide that. Even though we're hearing a lot of input from the general public, as we should, from our constituents, the reality is that is a vote taken by each representative to represent who will lead that House and allow him or her to do what it takes to vote the issues that are important to their district. And so to have folks who have never met Joe Straus, who've never participated in the process or really understand the facts relating to his leadership in the House, to instruct us to vote that way, I think is on information that is patently false and ignores the true conservative record of Joe Straus and his accomplishments.
Representative Darby, this just, in my mind, I just begin to rub my head and think, if I were a foreigner and I just came into Texas and I observed even mildly the last legislature, I would think this has got to be the most conservative place on the planet. And then I look and I see we've got 130 representatives. Just you'd have to guess that you have about 130 representatives who are going to vote for Joe Straus. Yet this fight goes on, and even though, despite the conservative record of the House in the last legislature, and despite the numbers, why is this going forward? I've got to ask myself, what is the end game for the dissent here? I mean, they are clearly going to lose, but why do they continue to make this war and, commit the errors that you've just listed?
Well, they're passionate. I don't want to discredit anyone for believing in an objective that they think is worthy and working hard to achieve that objective. But I think they, in doing so, they have focused on the individual and not on the accomplishments of the House and the legislative process. I don't know why they're continuing, other than they passionately believe that they should move forward. But we're going to get beyond this. This is going to be the first vote of the session, and then we're going to move beyond it. We're going to elect a speaker. The speaker will be Joe Straus. And then we'll move through the process of sorting through some 7,500 bills, and in a state that is truly conservative and limited government, and there's a libertarian bent to a lot of us, and we don't need any more new laws and regulations. It's funny to me how people are so interested in bills that are being filed, and you want your representative to file a bunch of bills. The process is designed to kill bills. We don't need a whole lot of more bills and regulations, but yet the public is fascinated by the need to file a bunch of bills to add to that bureaucratic state that we seem to live in, both federally and statewide.
Representative Darby, there are plenty of bills that matter to West Texas. We hope that you'll consider coming back on with us here at the West Texas Drive. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your work for West Texas.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'd be glad to come back on at any time.
All right. God bless you. Have a good evening.
Okay, you too. Bye.
Well, all right. Great segment. A lot of good content on that one. We're going to go to the CBS Network News, and then we'll come back with Natasha Snodgrass from A Girl and a Gun Shooting Club. Stick around. We'll be right back.